Gentlemen, welcome to today's lecture, Rome from Republic to Empire. And I want to start off by getting you to turn your attention to the image here on the right. And this image captures everything that you need to know about the Romans. It's the image of Romulus and Remus, the legendary founders of Rome, these two brothers that were raised by this she-wolf. And the Romans very much took this story to heart. They very much viewed their legacy as sort of a legacy of one that was, one of greatness, one that overcame struggles, one that were seen as unreal in many settings. So these two legendary brothers founded Rome on the 7 hills of Rome, right outside the Tiber River. You see that Rome was originally based out of Italy, which juts into the Mediterranean Sea, protected from the Adriatic Sea and the Tyrrhenian Sea on the east and the west, as well as the Ionian Sea to the south. Italy's geography is going to be a lot different from Rome. It's a peninsula, if you remember that from like elementary school, surrounded by water on 3 sides. Okay, and the country as itself is not that big. It's 750 miles from north to south, but only at its widest part, Italy is 120 miles. So there's really no thing that stops you from traveling to and through Italy. The soil was very fertile due to the many large plains in Italy, and the land was much more fertile than the land in Greece. What does that mean? That's going to equal to a larger population. You can go back to the lecture that talked about the traits of a civilization. You can't have a large population if you can't feed and sustain those people. And so the Italians are not going to have much need for trade, unlike their Greek counterparts. There are many small rivers in Italy, so there's not going to be any destructive flooding. And Italy has mountains, but the mountains are to the north, which means that this is going to unify the peninsula, unlike where we saw in Greece, where all of the mountains isolated the communities. The Apennines are down the center, but they're not as unifying, and they're a smaller mountain chain. A lot of other people are going to contribute things to the Roman society, so we just can't assume that the Romans just created all these things. First of all, let's talk about the language. A group of people that developed in a region known as Latium are going to give the Romans the first language, which is going to be Latin. But the region, like I said, is the region of Latium. Moving on, a group of people known as Etruscans are going to invade the Latium region, and they're going to urbanize Rome, and they're going to show us the dangers of monarchy. Rome, which was founded originally as a monarchy, is going to be eliminated. They tell this story called the Rape of Lucretia, which we don't have time to get into. But the essential moral of the story is that one man in charge of a lot cannot be trusted, because regardless of how powerful that one man is, he ultimately is corrupt and seeking his own interest. And then the Romans are going to get a lot of contribution from Greeks as their example for what it's like to have culture. The Greeks are also going to expose them to what it's like to self-govern. And so, but, the Greeks aren't perfect, and they're going to show that there are some dangers of democracy. So therefore, since the Romans will not have a democracy like the Greeks because they felt it was too weak in the time of war and there was constant change of leadership, but the Romans will not have a monarchy either because it's too abusive in times of peace. So what will they have? That's right, they will have a republic. Res publica, which means that which belongs to the people. So a couple of things to note. A Roman is the people or people groups living in or around the city of Rome. A republic, not a democracy, is a form of government in which voters elect officials. So you elect officials who represent you on your behalf. And so the fact that Rome is a republic is a compromise between their negative experience with the Etruscan kings and the weakness of the Greeks during the Peloponnesian War. The social structure is going to be the original thing that gives Romans much tension. First, let's talk about a patrician. A patrician is virtually one who is of the highest class in Rome, and a patrician is going to be the makeup from 136 Roman families. Originally, the 300 members of the Senate are going to be the upper class, and they're going to virtually control and influence Roman society. Well, then you have this large group of people known as the plebeians, who had the right to vote. They made up the vast majority of the society. These included people like your farmers, your merchants, your artisans, all the people who ran the day-to-day life and citizen. Some were actually very wealthy. They couldn't marry a patrician, and they could not hold public office. So you have this large population of people here who are basically X'd out of government and government participation because they're not from one of these 136 Roman original senator families. And that's going to bring us to what comes to be known in history as the struggle of order. And if you see that it's going to last for a little over 200 years, and it's going to be led by the wealthy plebeians who refuse to fight. And their reason for refusing to fight is because they say, if you want us to fight and defend Rome, then you got to let us have a say-so in the government. And so this 200-year tension between the plebeians and the patricians is going to end with the patricians making some concessions. They're going to create the 12 tablets of law, which you need to know that this is basically the Roman version of the Constitution. Okay, they're going to create the tribune, which is a government position that is held by plebeians. Okay, so it's a plebeian-based position. Then they're also going to create a council where plebeians could influence government. But really nothing changes until they create what's called the Lex Canulea, which allows plebeians and patricians to marry and then break that bond between, or break that stalemate between the plebeians and the patricians. Very, very interesting. If you take a brief look here at the Roman Republic government, you're going to have the consul, who's basically the president. You're going to have the dictator and the tribunes, and then you're going to have the praetors, the censors, and the aediles. There's also a legislative branch with senators, 300 men appointed for life. These are the most powerful people here in Roman society. You want to be a senator. It's actually more promising than being the consul. And so they're going to have all these various forms of government. Rome comes to contact with another people group at the time that really is going to help expand its influence in what comes to be known as the Punic Wars. There are 3 wars between Rome and Carthage out of North Africa, and Rome's going to win all 3. Here's what it comes down to. Rome wins all 3. And after they win all 3, you see that the Roman Republic is going to expand. And many historians tell you that this is actually the moment in time when Rome officially became an empire. A lot of folks like to say it was after Julius Caesar, but many historians will tell you that after their defeat of Carthage in the Punic Wars was when Rome became an empire. They're going to have a vast amount of slavery in the Roman world, and they're going to use Greeks oftentimes as their slaves, as household servants or tutors, because of the Greeks' culture being so valuable. Okay? But the Republic is going to fall mostly because people are going to try to make changes that the average Roman doesn't really want. The small farmers during the Punic Wars are going to lose their land. The Second Punic War, Hannibal, the Carthaginian general, is going to march elephants through the Roman farmland, and it's going to destroy these large Roman lands. And so now you have an increased number of poor people in Rome who are looking for direction, looking for new leadership. And virtually, you have people who need government intervention and who need government welfare for sustainable life. And what ends up happening is that these people have nothing. And so we're going to have some folks that try to make some attempts at land reforms. First, the Gracchi brothers. They're going to try to limit the amount of public land the patricians can use. And that work's going to be continued from Tiberius to Gaius Gracchus. But you're going to see that they're going to be killed by a mob. We're going to have civil wars between two other leaders, Marius and Sulla, who try to recruit landless Roman men to fight in this private army. But that's also going to be a negative impact on Rome. And thus, what you're going to have happen is you're going to have a private army, or creation of private armies, until Octavian and Mark Antony are going to fight in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium. A lot of times people like to note this fight as the fight that officially ends the Roman Republic. And thus, Octavian makes himself called emperor or princeps. Okay, let's skip forward here. Princeps. I want you to know the princeps means first amongst equals. So he's trying to give off this idea that, like, I rule with the Senate. I'm a co-ruler with the Senate. But really and truly, the princeps had absolute authority. There was no equals. There was no, he really wasn't even with the Roman people. But the Senate is going to give him the title Augustus. So Octavian, the first emperor of Rome, is going to be Augustus, the revered one. Okay, let's skip ahead. Roman religion was contractual, but not belief based. Okay. Octavian is going to introduce emperor worship, which means you have a sign of loyalty. So the Romans are going to start practicing the worshiping of their emperor. The only thing I want you to really know about the army thus far is that the army is going to be one in which they have smaller legions, more training, and people now, the army becomes a full-time job. So unlike Greece, where people had to defend their own polis, in Rome, you have these legionnaires or Roman soldiers who are going to defend their people. The army was loyal to the emperor. They were paid by the emperors, and he moved the generals around so they can never get too comfortable with a particular army. Okay, and you had to basically commit a lifetime of service to the Roman army as well, 20 years. All right. Rome is going to go through this period called the Pax Romana, or the period of security, order, and harmony that flourished and allowed Rome to expand from 27 BC to 180 AD, which begins with Octavian and ends with the death of Emperor Marcus Aurelius from the movie Gladiators, all you Russell Crowe fans. Prior to that, though, you're going to see a line of emperors called the Julio-Claudian emperors. All are related to Augustus in some form. And what they're going to do is they're going to decrease the power of the Senate, but they're all going to exhibit tyrannical behavior. And they're all going to have increase the role of the Praetorian Guard, which is a unit of servers who essentially their role was to protect the Roman people. Or excuse me, to protect the emperor. And then they're going to increase the bureaucracy that exists amongst Romans. Emperor Vespasian is famous for building the Colosseum. And then Rome goes through a period that was come to be known as the time of the 5 good emperors. Of the 5, the 3 best become Trajan, Hadrian, and Marcus Aurelius. All of them are adopted, and all of them are going to maintain the Pax Romana, or this Roman peace, where Rome is at its height. Rome is at its glory days. It is wonderful to be a Roman. They accomplish many things, like they build roads. They have many services. And then you have the works of Hadrian, who built a massive wall that still exists today. It's actually in England. And what we see is virtually the Roman Empire is going to be vast, and their influence is going to be very dominant. And in closing, the big thing that you really need to see is that Rome is going to be a place where the emperors vary, but the achievements are great. Thank you.